So context, yes, context is always important. A lot of other speakers, senior speakers from our fraternity have spoken about. So it's just the context setting of the environment, and to read this is, it was a new function for PepsiCo, right? So the function was new, the role was new. So which is different from if you're replacing someone, right? So people will question, who are you? What do you bring to the table, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the applicability, which is a green for, it's a new for me, it's a new for the organization, and that's how I put the context together. Culture, ways of working, very important. In the company that you're setting up for, if you take up that opportunity in future, very important. And in fact, one of the, at a middle to senior at least, the culture is looked at very seriously these days. And not just the experience and expertise that you bring to the table. So very important to get into while you obviously learn about the culture through the way, but getting into the things quickly, the ways of working, use your manager well for any conflict situations that you may get into, so that it's smoother for you. Midst of transformation. So PepsiCo specifically had started its transformation journey 2.5 years back, and that's what I put, not applicable for me, but it did have an impact on people having temperaments, people not stable in their roles, moving around. So your induction might get hampered, which it did for personally for me, and it took longer for me to understand the business as a whole and what I'm supposed to deliver. Business headwinds, yes, we as a company are seeing some headwinds coming from the changing consumer trends around and acceptability of our products. So versus good prior periods of 4 to 5 years, it's now more challenging period for us, and we're dealing with that. So, and new industry and new orientation. I never worked for CPG. I took it up really as a challenge. The challenge was really setting it up, but many of the things you'll see were new. I mean, the industry itself was new to me. So that's what it is. Moving on, the first one, building the organization for yourself, right? So you did, I did get 2 resources which were doing analysis, okay, in PepsiCo as part of Insights function when it was seeded, and Insights was actually part of marketing function. So as a sub-function, they were doing day-to-day analysis, reporting of the syndicated panels from some bit around household data and the consumer track, et cetera, et cetera. So I had those 2 team members, and I had the JD. So obviously you were hired for the JD, but don't, and there's an immediate agenda coming out from the JD and why you're hired for the role, but don't directly jump into it, okay? Things are different. Things keep moving on. Change is constant. We keep hearing that. So please make sure you take time. In fact, one of the good things that happen in our company is CEO meets every new hire. So I did share these, I mean, some of the concerns that I had, and he guided, don't do anything drastically different for the next 4 to 6 months, okay? And I seriously obeyed his order. So I stayed with that. Take your time. Don't directly get into jumping, designing things. Reach out to stakeholders. You know you have an agenda. At least you know all the commercial heads, category heads, etc. One quick check. Sorry. Who are? How many of you are from the CPG world? Okay, not many. Maybe just 10%. But I think you'll be able to relate it to some of the learnings that you take away from this session. And even apply to other industries. But so why I was asking was the category structure and stuff like that. And some of the other things and KPIs that you're going to see through the presentation are more attuned to the CPG world and specifically PepsiCo. Capability need gap assessment. That's what logically you'll do after you understood 80% of stuff. And after setting up the agenda, you'll know what things or projects you're going to deliver on. And then that comes in, and then design the structure. So that structure, I know I had 3 variants of the structure, and we actually discussed. I actually discussed with my manager on what's going to work best, and finally we had a category aligned analytics structure. So my analytics, in fact, 2 of my team members are here. They specifically are embedded in as business analytics professional within the category. So we have a 3-category structure at PepsiCo, which is beverages, snacks, and nutrition. So they're actually embedded into that. Versus an option of having horizontal skill set, more of a pyramid, right? So where you could house all data management reporting into one and all business analytics into one, which gives you more efficiency, but it may not be that effective, right? So it's your choice. But this is the structure that has worked for me. Okay, hiring right, not best. Okay, so excellent talent pool available in this room itself. The first thing, and I talked about this in the earlier slide, the cultural fitment, very important. That culture eats strategy for breakfast, right? For lunch as well as dinner, right? Somebody said that. So very important that you have the cultural orientation, a close fitment to the kind of culture that one brings to the table, so that you have very easy gel-in of that team member within and is effective. Demonstrated skill set, yes. And then finally, go-getters. Yes, we as a company are aggressive, okay? We are easy to work with, but also aggressive in their own sense. So this is a skill set that we commonly look at when we hire for PepsiCo. And then I talked about the pyramid structure. So I think there was a remark yesterday, a slide also in one of the sessions, which said pyramid is dead. From a hierarchy standpoint, yes, pyramid is dead. But from once you have to organize, because you won't get all these skill sets in one person. So if you have to organize your team, 3-member team, 10-member team, 20-member team, you will need to organize the skill sets as per the pyramid, and obviously the top one is the advanced analytics that you're looking at. Okay. Setting up processes. So I had a strong orientation when I was part of Genpact, and I'm a firm believer that after people, it's the processes that make things or break things, right? And that's what I instituted here. I mean, and that has worked for me, and how? So just an illustration, this is how the process looks like, right? In analytics process, it's still not many people would say go hand in hand, but it has really worked for me. See, you are part of a business. Once you're part of the business, you have certain deliverables by design itself, which is for the planning cycles that you have, you need to provide the forecasting inputs. You need to get into building the share category constructs, right? So, and you have collaborative effort in doing that. So once you do that, and this is where the commercial finance category insights, a lot of other functions also get in, you have your part to play. Since they were, first time I learned, okay, this is not working for me because I don't know what to do, who is going to give me what, etc. So took lead and built the processes. And I've just given an example. Okay, so another thing that we have in our company, and it's various form, it comes from Six Sigma philosophy. I mean, a lot of simple tools are very actually useful and powerful. DICE, so you have RASI in Six Sigma, etc. It's the who decides, who to inform, who to consult, and who executes, right? So within the team analytics, within the insights function, and across the functions for the processes that cut across, we actually built that. Analytics took the lead to build that, and that was highly regarded, and it actually eased things out, right? So, which focuses on responsibilities and interfaces without function, avoids the conflicts. So if you think from an analytics standpoint, any model development which has to go through deployment, it also does a beautiful thing of aligning, and once you've documented, really making the deployment easy, right? So, and smooth. So this is how it works. You won't get it first time right. Again, I said, so you iterate, you publish, you have to communicate well. You need to have sessions, use HR function, because that's a key stakeholder here to institute the processes and the DICE's framework, etc., and lock them in. Execute, be process champion, yes. So I talked about this, it's worked, and as an example, budget planning is a big exercise for us. We are So analytics is actually now entrusted to take lead across the budget planning exercise level, also at as a global SME. So going forward, okay, that's a big one. Partnering with functions and co-owning the agenda. Okay, this is where you start delivering. So this is how I just quickly designed. Analytics actually works very closely. We have one function with the consumer insights function, okay, because that's how we got seeded. We didn't get incubated in supply chain ops or some other function, but it was within the categories. So that's the core. We work hand in hand with the consumer insights for bringing on the triangulated story on performance, on trends, etc. We do the analytical bit, help them do the deeper insighting part, and the business performance analysis that we do. You have sponsors. So both at the left and right side, I don't know if you can read, it's written global or senior management. And on the other side, it's the functions. This is just examples of sales, marketing, and finance. So you do have, and you have customers at both ends, right? They're also customers, they're also stakeholders, and you have to find common agenda items so that you deliver on them, prioritize, thereafter get the sponsorship, and then get into doing things, piloting things. That's how you proceed. So yeah, but before you do that, I mean, that's a competency that PepsiCo puts up as a must-have, is knowing your business cold, right? So it will take you time, not before 6 to 12 months, that you'll really be able to fine-tune your agenda and be able to understand what is important for the organization to deliver on, etc. So it's your responsibility. At the end of the day, the key word is, please get into forums, please get into discussions, please get into having one-on-ones with your important stakeholders to really understand what they want, okay? And what the business is. By doing that, eventually you will understand the business better, go through a lot of documentation which is available in the company, go out in the field, understand, meet with consumers, go to plants, do whatever, know the because analytics, eventually you're not setting it up for the short term. You're setting it up for a longer term, where it's gonna really service customers across the organization, right? So that's the vision for us at PepsiCo. I think this is what I talked about: network, explore, sense opportunities, and who is underserved. So because you have stakeholders and because they're going to also have a say on your performance at the end of the year, make sure you don't have folks, at least where you could have tried to service them with something, right? So that's important. Okay, figure out the common agenda items. Now, one example, lift and shift. This is in the global context, more or less, which is, we have been talking about one of the big initiatives actually is about data harmonization to analytical linkages across input-output drivers to business 360 dashboards, right? So even the basics, I'm sure, and I've interacted with many people, it's still a challenge at many of our organizations, which is really different data sources talking to each other and you having a 360 view of the performance and really having quantified impact of the drivers. So that's just one example. We found a common ground with the global, which also across markets have been hearing the same things, and found a common ground. And now next week I travel to Dubai to do that assessment for my sector, right? So that's how it is evolved, and that's an opportunity we latched onto. And it's a big initiative, might happen in phases. Funding is something that gets resourced because of this. And yeah, so service provider approach helps. Yeah, so for me, again, coming from the orientation, I moved from a service provider, Accenture, to business. So which was a lot of change, and that's the orientation, that's a different topic altogether. But that approach itself actually helps, because at the end of the day, you are a service provider, okay? Even if you're a function, you're working towards it. Beyond insights, when you start delivering to sales, when you start delivering to finance, strategy, IT, it's important that you have that. And what that means, it means hearing them out. It means really doing something about it and offering solutions, right? And the best thing that then the only difference there is ready to help you if you help me, right? So that's how it works. Lead solution design, if not the solution itself. Yeah. So you're not there to solve for every problem, right? Besides the constraints of data not being there or resources not being there, there'll be problems that you can deal with, but you can always get into bringing your POV, which is point of view, or inputs to how a solution might look like. One good example there is now, since last year, end of last year, digital has largely been working with marketing at an execution level. Now there are standard measurements that come in every week, etc. But the larger questions are around the digital investments paying off, or deeper sentiment analysis to what the impact, hard impact it has on our volumes, etc., is something that we are getting into. So we've done some pilots which have been well accepted, in fact have been groundbreaking, and we'll take that forward, the gen. So that's something we really didn't do much about it, but because there was an approach on how we're going to do it, we had some demo tools we used, Watson was one of them, and delivered on this as a proof of concept. So just an example. Okay, so this is simple, straightforward. I don't know if you're in some of the peers that are in similar environments, but reporting itself is something that we own as a function, right? Which are monthly reports to brand managers, category managers, across syndicated data, across different other data sources, and more integrated data reports which are now started coming in. But we did an overhaul last year. And that overhaul meant what? We reached out to every recipient of that report, okay? Important stakeholders, but we reached out to them on how they're using the report. Is that useful? Are there any elements that they want additional, etc.? We heard them. Then we got into rationalizing what we get today to merging the reports, deduplicating, eradicating stuff. And we actually brought down, on that point, the number of reports by half or so, okay? And we instituted some new, which were more relevant for the business, and then talk about data dumps. So which comes here? Democratized data, which is instituting simpler Excel dumps. Now, for example, Nielsen, if you know, you have panel, etc. Nielsen answers is tough to learn, or not everyone will get into punching the code and getting the data out. So we instituted the simple data Excels and put it on a server with a link, get refreshes every month. Simple things, which was very relevant for the business, and everyone loved it. Okay, so we delivered them faster. So we cut down the delivery time of the reports by 33%, by 1/3. So that's another thing, because that means speed to action. Then harmonizing, some bits that you will end up doing is also, is it like to like in terms of reporting, so which is the harmonization part, and some of the reports which need to go through the standardizing part. So do that, and overall communicate well with your stakeholders on what has changed and why this is useful. And if you can get feedback on that, nothing like it. Which is depicted here. So information overload, we reduced that, time to delivery we reduced, and then obviously accessibility and availability, that was improved. Then you have, one of the key, by default, one of the key analytical outputs that we deliver on is the forecasting itself, right? And forecasting has been, I think, many sessions have dealt with that. I was very prompted to, in the last session, to really say that time series doesn't work for us anymore, and I think that was the theme. So it doesn't work. We're junk time series models, okay? All together, we don't use them. In this cycle, we even the last time, we used to have blended output of time series model going along with the causal model and giving some guidance to the business. And we own this guidance. So on the category forecast, how the category is going to grow is the key output that we deliver every 6 months. Okay, one for the long range planning, one for the short range planning. So you needed to assess what are the challenges. You really needed to understand why it's not working for us. And it was off by huge margin. Okay, I'm talking the last, say, 2 years assessment, etc. So, and what are the challenges? I mean, why it's not working for you? So understand that well. Align forecasting with delivery. Yeah. So this point is more on. So you certainly have a deliverable and there is a process. So you need to better deliver whatever input you have to give in by the larger planning cycle. So it's just about working, and it becomes a high pressure for us for many times to deliver in time, which is our forecasting output. Yeah, coming from the earlier point that I was making, we have, it's really a version 2 which is now working and will assess the accuracy of it, building the causal and econometric models, right? So this is something that we believe. So history is no predictor of future in the environment, in the world that we are in. Maybe some of the very stable categories it works, it doesn't work for us. So there's a lot of external variables other than the internal variables that we are actually throwing in, macros, pseudo for health and wellness, etc., that we are trying to throw in and getting to more robust econometric models. So, but yes, there's a long way to go. I mean, it's never a perfect model. We'll be judging what we landed and or executed this year. Yeah, so diagnose. So whatever inputs you gave in the last time, what has been the cause of change? What were the assumptions made around it? Very important. And why your forecast was off basis the assumptions that you set in. So that's important. And then moderate. At the end of the day, you don't want an analytical output which is anyways based on not so perfect data and based on assumptions to go in. So as is. So you do want to moderate with the short-term, very short-term phenomena which might be happening with the category or the views or the inputs that you have from the field on how the category is doing. So there's a bit of moderation that actually goes in, and that actually works. Yeah, so somebody said that, and I completely vouch for that, which is as much an art as it is a science, right? So okay, so the biggest bucket is actually sales and marketing spends, and where you get into optimizing for companies like us and many others, sales and marketing is a huge spend. And so some of the simpler things, so we figured out this point, the first bullet is largely talking to where we figured out that commercial units were actually underserved, not the category. And for the commercial units, they really needed to understand which is the most important KPI to drive. Is it my stock share? Is it my weighted? Is it my total distribution points? Now, these are some of the CPG specific stuff that I'm talking about. But and which are those markets which have high potential, etc. So we have done market prioritization from many angles and including macros. So that's something that we delivered on. Then the pack, really getting into the detailed pack into tier, into channel stuff on prioritization. And then obviously the prioritization of KPIs at those levels. So these are the simpler things, simple regressions, but worked really well. And in fact, it was an entire dashboard that we then finally delivered on, and even on tracking how the sales execution has happened. Right, so few examples there. You can just, if you can't read, I mean, the example, for example, weighted distribution is the most important KPI versus the others for a particular brand into market. So things like that. So, and we actually build simple Excel within Excel. This is the Excel piece, which is building execution algorithms, which is so, for example, how many number of outlets are needed for me to gain a 1% ND or a 1% market share. So these are simpler things, but very powerful in terms of planning and doing an immediate action. So this is what we delivered, and market mix, yes. So the biggest, for the first time in its entirety, 2015 is when we landed the market mix models for all brands and categories in beverages. And some big decisions that we influenced. I would have loved to refresh them every cycle, and then, but we did not actually do that because of resource constraints. But what is important there in projects like this is data is the key. Okay, so we didn't have great data, and it took data cycle itself took a couple of months to just close that phase, and but at the end of the day, what goes in comes out. So right, so it's important that if the data either there can be wear rounds which might work, get the sign off on those wear rounds with the business, that this is how going to use the gaps or fill the gaps, and make whatever relevant assumptions that you need to. Don't answer questions. Yeah, so it can't answer greatest, and we all know that market mix models or similar models can't answer what has not happened in the past. Okay, so some of the innovation which is completely new you will not be able to answer how it's going to do. It can't be predictive of that, right? So things like that. Model is completely, yeah, years time, right? So it doesn't, we don't use any model which is more than a year old, and neither should you. Hyper targeting, driving. This is another interesting project that we delivered on, and this was about, see,